This is Brent. Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. Well, let's go to the Catechism on the Constitution of the United States. And Arthur J. Stansbury. Oh, Miss Francine, by the way, we're ready for verse 13 of chapter 3 of 1 Peter. Well, Lord willing, we'll begin there tomorrow. Well, let's get to the Catechism on the Constitution, Arthur J. Stansbury. That's questions and answers. Catechism. We were talking yesterday with some family about Enoch in the Bible. Enoch. Remember, Enoch is the one that had a whole list of folk that had died, and they told how long he lived and how many children he had, children and grandchildren, and he died. And so lived 800 and some years and had children, and he died, and blah, 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 on, generation, and he died like a death knell. Boom, boom, boom. And then it comes to Enoch. Enoch. It says he lived 300 and some years, and then it says he walked ahead with God, walked with God. And then he was no more. He was not there. That's what the Hebrew word means. It has a distinct meaning. Ain is the way it's pronounced, the best we can get. Ain. It means he was not there. No, that means he was there. There's another word, just the opposite of that word. Ain. That means ayin yod nun. That means he was there. He was there. And then there's the word he's not there. And that's the word and he was not there anymore. Because it says God took him. He took him. What does that mean? That means he was raptured. Raptured. That means he was snatched up. People think something new about the rapture. Ain't nothing new about the rapture. I can think of a couple of people that were raptured out. Enoch was the first, and then, of course, well, there were others. But Enoch, I don't want to get off the point here. Enoch means catechizer, one who catechizes. He was a teacher, and a teacher by a specific method. And that specific method is here. It's a questions and answers. And many of you that are listeners, some of you no doubt have been catechized. If you're raised in the Roman church tradition, there's a Roman catechism you go through. And you learn fundamentals about who God is, the doctrine of the Trinity, the triune God, the authority of whatever they say is authority in the Bible, whatever they want to teach you. It's questions and answers, and you learn the answers and the questions and the answers to the questions. And once you got them down cold, then you're catechized. The Presbyterians use what's called a Westminster Catechism to teach the Reformed Protestant point of view, which means the biblical point of view. There is the Heidelberg Catechism, which teaches also the Reformed Protestant point of view, and it's a Dutch. The Belgic Confession and the Catechism, same thing, from the Belgic areas, the Frankish areas of Northern Europe. Then there's the Heidelberg, yes. Then there's the Lutheran Catechism. Luther wrote that one. The group I was in, founded by a fellow who was half Presbyterian and half Dutch German Reformed. His mother was one, his father was another. And he wrote a catechism. And that catechism was substantially Reformed, as I'd said, like the Westminster. But it's not well known. It's just that some people become famous and some don't. But it was good. Catechism. It's a good way to learn. Matter of fact, it's consistent with what the Bible says is the good way to learn. Line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. Oh, that means that repetition is the mother of knowledge. That's what that means. Over and over again. And you learn the catechism. That's what this catechism about the Constitution of the United States, a slice of common law government. Our Constitution is a slice, a brief of common law government as applied to the general government in Washington, D.C. So we're on question 171, I do believe, and we're going to start there. Here we go. Or 271, rather. Here it is. Is jury trial a wise way to resolve differences? Answer: certainly, as they say in New Jersey, certainly. Trial by jury is a most precious, as it secures to every man a fair hearing, and is the best safeguard of his liberty, his property, and his life. This man says, in his humble opinion, trial by jury, and of course, our Constitution of the United States guarantees trial by jury in our federal courts. What does that mean? Well, it doesn't say all this because it's a brief of common law government, but it means 12-man jury, and they all have to agree on their verdict. That much we know because that's a common law jury. To say common law jury is redundant. It's redundant. You're repeating yourself because the jury, by definition, is a creature of our common law. It does not exist in any non-common law countries, and that means most of the world. Most of the world are under some form of the Roman Empire's code, canon civil law code of Justinian, not to mention the Church of Rome and the Eastern Orthodox Church. And everybody else that's not Christian is under that law, religions and countries that have state religions, which in fact make up most of the world. Islamic countries, for example, they follow the law of the city. They follow it in principle. They don't enact the code, they just follow it in principle. Most of the world has enacted the code in some form. The canon laws of the Church of Rome, they've enacted it that way, such as Ethiopia. The code of the Roman Emperor Justinian, the French form called the Code Napoleon. And then there is a code of France that is previous to the Code Napoleon. It's a form of the Code of the Emperor Justinian. By the way, Louisiana is under that pre-Napoleonic code called the French Code before Napoleon took over. After that, it was called the Code Napoleon, a little bit tweaked a little bit different. And then there are countries around the world that are under the German form of the code, called traditionally the Code of Bismarck. Oh, yeah, some of you heard me say that before. It doesn't hurt repeating it again. Trial by jury, though, only exists in common law countries. It secures a fair hearing and secures life, liberty, and property. There is nothing else you have in this life except your life, your liberty, and your property. Now, those three things, our Declaration of 76 cites, those three things comprise everything without exception that a man can have in this life. He only got three things. Of course, that it could stand a lot of explanation, but there are liberty to what? Life, yeah, liberty though, liberty. A life, what is liberty? Liberty fundamentally is the freedom to make choices, discerning choices within the scope of your lawful jurisdiction. Discerning choices within the scope of your lawful jurisdiction. Maintain order in your jurisdiction. Boy, that's tough, friends. I'll tell you, as a matter of fact, God help me. Oh, me, yeah, I'm chasing order within my jurisdiction. I like it. I want to chase it. I want to nail it down. As we said in Peter, and in my jurisdiction is life, liberty, and property. I want them to be ordered according to the orders of the God of all order. That's the only order that's possible that will get you tranquility, peace of mind, all which might be taken from him by a partial or corrupt judge. A partial or corrupt judge. Juries are our statement in our common law tradition, our statement that we do not trust judges. A jury is proof in our common law world that we do not trust judges. If we trusted judges, why take the time to impanel a jury? If we trusted lawyers, the experts in the law, why take time to impanel a jury and the expense? Because we don't trust them. God has ordained the jury, a jury of sinners. But if we do it his way, according to his order, according to his orders, then he says, that's what I want, and we will have tranquility. You turn it over to a judge, and all you're going to have is dissatisfied parties. You won't have justice because God says justice is delivered only in individual instances, that's individual cases, and only by a 12-man jury bringing in the verdict, a 12-man jury of sinners. Yeah, just grab 12 men standing around. It tickles me a little bit. When I hear the old timers in our common law tradition talk about 12 men good and true, no, that's a bad habit to talk that way. There is no such thing as 12 men really good and true. There are 12 men that are pursuing God's order and God's law. We want that. Stalwart, that God has infused in them his faithfulness. But that doesn't mean they're perfect because they're not even close. You've never been in a jury room. You don't know what imperfection is. Oh, boy. Katie, bar the door. You get in a jury room, they'll lock you in sometimes. You have to put up with some of the people in the rooms almost too much. But just remember, if you're on the jury and you don't agree, there is no verdict. And you don't have to agree with 11 other people or 10 or 9. It's your job to persuade them in your direction. Oh, it's tough. You haven't got the heart for it, you're not doing your duty. You're just tired and want to go to a ball game or go home and get supper or go home and get something to eat. You're not doing your job. This is your opportunity to bring God's order. Don't give in unless you believe it's the just thing to do. You're in the driver's seat at that point. Every one of them, every one of the jurors, all 12 are in the driver's seat. They can make it go one way or the other. They certainly can hang fire. They can hang fire. What does that mean? Hang fire? That means that the jury is cocked and loaded. They've heard the evidence. They're loaded into the jury room, and they're supposed to come out and fire, innocent or guilty. What if they have a misfire and one juror won't go along with the crowd? That's called a misfire, called a hung jury. Where does that come from? Hung jury? Why do we say that? It's from our gun culture in America. That means it's hung fire. The fire has hung up. The fire has hung up. You see, in a firing train, on a flintlock, you pull the lever back, the lock. Lock's an old Anglo word that means movement. You pull the moving thing back. You got, and when you squeeze off the trigger, that lock moves and it comes down hard and fast on a piece of flint and throws a spark into the pan. Put a little gunpowder, highly flammable, put that in the pan, throws a spark into the pan. And the pan is right beside a little tiny hole in the side of the barrel. And that spark, when that gunpowder gets that spark from that flint, it ignites. That means it burns so fast it creates a small explosion. And the heat of that explosion communicates through that little peephole in the side of the barrel where you have packed powder with a ramrod, and that gunpowder in there ignites, and all of a sudden it's just that much powder, but when it ignites almost instantaneously, it needs about 36 feet of room just to exist, and it's going to get it because it just changed from a solid to a gas, and it's got to have that room. So what does it do? It drives that projectile has no place to go but out the barrel. But to get out the barrel, it has to drive that lead ball out of the barrel. And that's what drives the ball when you. But what if you got it all set up? You got the fire, the train of fire. There's two trains, a spark hits the pan hits the powder in the barrel. There's a two-step process called a fire and train. It's called a fire and train in the science of pyrotechnics, in the science of ordnance. Science and the knowledge of ordnance. I don't like to use fancy words. Well, it creates a fire and train. And if anywhere in that train there are two steps, either one of those steps don't work, either the flint's wet and it doesn't ignite the gunpowder in the pan, or the gunpowder in the pan is wet and it doesn't go off right, it just smokes and doesn't ignite the powder in the barrel through that little peephole, or the powder in the barrel's got moisture in it, or for whatever reason it doesn't go off, that means your fire got hung up someplace, and we call that hang fire. Hang fire. Well, I pulled the trigger and it hung fire on me. That means it misfired. It did not fire. And so if the jury is primed and loaded with all the evidence, and you stick them in the jury room and you lock the door and you put the sheriff's deputy, the bailiff, outside to not let anything in or anything out, so they'll decide it, another provision of our common law, so they can only decide the case on the evidence that was presented at court, and they won't sneak something else in. That's like packing them in the barrel, and they're supposed to come out with a verdict. But they don't all agree. That's called a hung jury. The fire of the jury is hung. That's okay. That's the way it's supposed to be. It only takes one. It's not a majority institution. This is not a Republican form of government. Well, the Republican form is over in the legislative branch. This is not a republic, my friends. A republic has to do with majority rule, as does democracy. But this is our common law tradition. It's all or nothing in the jury. It takes 12. Does the jury decide in civil suits as well as in criminal prosecutions? Answer. That's the question. And the answer he has here is, I'm going to read it. I do not understand the difference between the two. He's anticipating the student's question, and then he answers that question. What is the difference between a civil and a criminal case? I don't like to call them civil cases. I call them non-criminal and criminal. That defines it. There are some cases in court that are non-criminal. There are some other cases in court that are criminal prosecutions. Others, I'm just suing you because you owe me money and you're not paying. You owe me a debt and you say you don't owe me a debt. And so I sue you in court, and I hope that I can get the jury to agree with me. Present the evidence, let them decide. In a criminal prosecution, that's non-criminal. In a criminal prosecution, the defendant in that case is accused of a crime, and the prosecution will present evidence of that crime. That's what happens. Well, what's the difference? What does he say? Question 273. He says, by a civil suit, that is a non-criminal case in court, I mean one citizen's calling another citizen. I don't like that word either. It doesn't have to be by the way, it doesn't have to be a citizen. You can sue somebody that's an illegal alien if you want. Or you can sue somebody that is here on a work visa legally, but is not a citizen. So I don't know why. I'm just thinking it's better to be more accurate here. And our courts will permit you to sue a non-citizen. And you don't have to be a citizen to sue either. You might be here on a green card. What if you're here illegally? I'd say if you're here illegally, this comes up in the court sometimes, you wouldn't have standing to sue. Now, if you came from another country and you're here legally to do business, would you have standing to sue? Absolutely. Maybe you're just here on business for a couple of days and you got your passport and you're in town for a month or something, or a week, and something happens, you can sue in our courts here. That's happened a lot. So his use of the word citizen doesn't mean much. And I think that that also is a misunderstanding among patriotic Americans, that you've got to be a citizen of the United States to enjoy your constitutional rights, your constitutionally protected rights. That is not true. That has never been true. No, no. If the United States government or the government of a state of the United here in the United States does something against you that is unlawful, that is beyond their limits, like tries to torture you, which we've done, you have standing to sue them. No question. Because our common law and our position in this country until very recently was God made you, whoever you are. And if you're here lawfully, you have standing to defend yourself. What if you're here unlawfully and somebody tries to steal your wife or your children? Do you have standing to sue? You better believe it, even if you're here unlawfully. Kidnapping is a capital crime. It can be prosecuted criminally, even if you're here unlawfully. You're here unlawfully and somebody tries to kidnap you or does kidnap you. Can you sue them? Answer, for damages. Answer, yes. Yes. Now, they may throw you out of the country. Before you can get it done, they may throw you out of the country after you get the case done. You may have to leave the country and come back lawfully to do it. But understand, all this so-called patriotic talk about, well, a citizen of the United States, this guy isn't a citizen, we can do what he wants to him. No, our law has never said that. Why? Because our common law recognizes that all men are creatures of God. God made them. That means they are creations. Creatures, that means you are a creation of something. Creature of God is a creation of God. And you don't, as the Bible says, you don't dishonor other men just because they're accused of a crime or even that they are convicted of a crime. That's Amendment 8, cruel and unusual punishment. Let's say that an illegal alien comes here. This has happened. We've seen it in the news. He comes here and he rapes and murders a teenager girl, a teenager, and rapes and murders her. Is he entitled to a fair trial? A constitutionally protected right? Is he entitled to the right to remain silent? A constitutionally protected right? Answer, yes, absolutely. And he'll be accorded it probably. But I know what the law is on that. Of course, he's entitled to all that. It doesn't make any difference. If he's breathing, he's entitled to it. If the government of the United States chooses, I'm quoting Justice Joseph Story of the U.S. Supreme Court in his commentaries on the Constitution, when he said, the Bill of Rights, the rights cited therein, are applicable anywhere the government of the United States chooses to act against those rights, whether in this country against an illegal alien, whether in a foreign country. Oh, that's happened a lot too. I hear people say, oh, we'll take them down to Gitmo, down to Guantanamo Bay. We can do anything we want down there because it's outside the jurisdiction of the United States. No, it isn't. Guantanamo is the jurisdiction of the general government in Washington, D.C., without question. Without question. It's a military base. It's under the jurisdiction of the United States. That's silly talk that people have. So what happens when you have that crazy attitude? You got a bunch of drunk, drug-infested lesbians in the army down there. Lesbians, yeah, I've seen the films. Maybe you have too. And sodomites having fun torturing Arabs, Islamic Arabs. Now, am I an Islamicist? No. Do I want Islam in my country? No. Do I want terrorists in my country? No. They should be prosecuted to the extent of the law, but they must be given a fair trial, and that encompasses a lot. Why? Because God demands it. That's why. And if we don't do it, George Bush and those guys promoting torture, our country will pay for that. Because I listened to a so-called conservative people saying, yeah, torture them, find out what, waterboard them. That's from the pit of hell, friends. You say, I don't agree, Brent. Well, whatever. I know the truth on that one. If I weren't sure about it, I would say, well, I don't know, but here's what I think. No, I'm telling you, that's God's law. No place in the Bible will you find legal cover for torture. No place. Oh, you see it happen a lot in the Bible, plenty of examples of it, but God's law does not give us that option. Our common law tradition does not give us that option. Torture is against our common law tradition. You know, torture is used as a way to get what the powers that be call truth out of people. Well, let's get some answers out of him. Put him down here and we'll put him on the rack. We'll put screws under his fingernails, or we'll rack him, or we'll waterboard him until he tells us what we want to know. That is a crime, and our country will pay. Our country will pay if we think that's okay. It's our duty. Here, what are we to do about it? We're to say no. I'm saying no right now. Why? Because the Bible says if I don't say no to that kind of thing, when the opportunity arises, when the wrath of God falls, it'll fall on me too. But he says if you say something and say no 1,000 times no, and I'm saying it publicly, I say it in private sometimes. You need to say it too. I hope God's got hold of you and said, that's not God's law. That's not the Bible. That's not our common law tradition. Torture has no place. Well, how do we get the truth out of people in our common law tradition? How do we do that? Here's how we do it. We have a device in our common law tradition. Only in our common law tradition. It's like the jury. It does not exist in the rest of the world. What do we call it? We call it cross-examination. Cross-examination. Yeah. And when we come back from this short break and listen to this song, we'll talk about cross-examination just a little bit, because I'm on the subject of torture. That's our answer to torture. And by the way, it's more effective. It's much, much, much more effective. In fact, it is the greatest surety of truth that we have in our due process. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long.